Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive, Andy. Just a little note for the viewers and the listeners. This was pre-recorded. Hopefully, Andy's enjoying his well-earned vacation right now, and hopefully, I'm on a boat somewhere off the Pacific Coast.
Undoubtedly, we'll talk about somebody and be like, this guy's and between now and when we air this, that guy will fracture his femur, and just know. And honestly, we're gonna do the same. We'll do it quicker, but we'll do the same kind of precursor when we get to the other one we're going to record. Actually, all four, just in case. Because I mean, that's what happens this time of year. That's the depressing part. Outside of the Cardinals, watching the Cardinals clips, I did check into that a little. But you're right, but a lot of guys get injured, and it's funny because we're going to talk about Tampa Bay off the top here, and they lost some players. I mean, they lost a very important offensive lineman right off the bat around this time last year, away in camp, and that was kind of a harbinger of things to come, because it wouldn't be the only offensive lineman that would hurt, and it wouldn't be the only player that would miss significant time for a team that ended up repeating as division champions and was your fourth playoff participant to go in with a losing record.
Incredible. Huge negative points differential.
Yeah, it was. I think they had the biggest negative, the worst point differential in their division.
Yeah, and they won.
Remember, everybody was kind of in it for a little bit, and I believe it was week 17 or 16 or 17 was almost a de facto play-in game between Carolina and Tampa Bay. And if you remember how bad Carolina was starting the season. It's not like they turned around the season and went 8-2. I think they went 6-5 to close the season, and we're kind of in it at the end. So that's what this division was last year. The Bucs were the winners, and their reward is a first place schedule.
You bring up Carolina, by the way, who had a terrible start to the season under the guise of Baker Mayfield, who now finds himself in Tampa. So Baker Mayfield can't quit the NFC South. NFC South was weird last year. Tampa with 8-9 record was the winners over Carolina, New Orleans, and Atlanta, who all went 7-10. Just an absolute miasma of sub-mediocrity in the NFC South last year, which I think has people a little maybe sleeping on this division this year to a degree. I mean, I don't think with the teams we're talking about today, we're going to see any, realistic noisemakers in the playoffs. And ultimately, maybe that's really where it's at. No NFC South team has a realistic chance to win the Super Bowl this year. But overall, I think the market is a hair low on these teams in aggregate. And that's including the idea that Tampa Bay might be one of the worst NFL teams this year, just on the basis of how they've constructed this roster and, the current status of the coaching, I guess the tenuous nature of the Todd Bowles coaching regime here. Let's reflect a little bit on 2020 for the Bucs, which ultimately, hey, the Rams, Packers, they were expected to be in the mix for a Super Bowl. They didn't make the playoffs. At least Tampa made the playoffs. Of the teams that were really expected to do well, they underachieved the least. I don't know. Is that faint praise? But this was a bad team last year. It was a bad team that got their butts handed to them every time they played a legitimately tough opponent. And were it not for some pretty fortuitous comebacks against some teams in their division, I don't think that realistically this was an 8-win team. It was quite a way for Tom Brady to put a final note on his career. But I want to kind of go back to camp last year, Andy, 1 year ago, when
it was a clusterfuck of retirements.
It was
unretirements.
Tom Brady unretired. He's back in camp. Surprise, he's missing. And speaking of being on vacation and being on a boat, we talked to enough people, and they're like, yeah, this is a weird absence. The coaches were not expecting it, and we're like, oh man, is he dealing with like a family emergency? Like, oh man, is there a health problem? Like, like, is it his mom? Like, there was all this weird.
There was a lot of steam
going
around,
on.
like
And
sick mom, wasn't there?
Our friends were literally like, my buddy is golfing in Baker's Bay, Bahamas, and he said Brady's just down there hanging out on his boat, and like Giselle was in Costa Rica with their kids, and it was like, okay, so he literally just doesn't want to be in camp. And he's enough of a veteran that he can kind of do what he wants. But it didn't help that he didn't have much chemistry going into the season with that group of offensive players. You had players like, super important pieces like Godwin coming off of a huge terrible injuries. You lose the entire interior offensive line to early camp injuries and retirements. And
the Marpet retirement was big. And
yeah, should Brady have stayed retired? What's your?
I think so. And then the weirdest retirement or unretirement, because the Gronk one checks out. That's fine. Like, that guy's given enough of his body to the league, and he's fun, and like, just let that guy go party. Like, that guy should just go to Ibiza and just party 365. Go get after it, Gronk. But the weirdest one was Brady unretires, and then 2-3 weeks later, Arians is like, I'm done.
No, I'm done. Yeah,
I'm done. I thought he was. I forgot. We never really got answers on that, because he did stay with the team. He's actually still with the team as an advisor. He's listed as a member of the coaching staff technically. So I mean, he's still there. I don't know what the whole deal was with that, but it led into the the Bulls regime. And I mean, if we're nitpicking 2022, obviously first on the list is the run game, because it's hard to get around a run game being that bad somehow. But Bulls probably not a plus as a head coach.
No,
like the decision making was poor, and then we also didn't love the offensive play calling, the offensive play caller, which obviously has been replaced. But so it was a weird offseason that turned into I guess we have a new head coach, and we're going to try this out, and we still have a Hall of Famer at quarterback. But we talked about this a little with the the rise of spending money on interior defensive linemen and what it matters against teams that have mostly invested in high-end tackles, especially if you have a pocket passer. Like, it's a big problem if you can get interior pressure. And it's funny, this is a team that probably has that in spades, obviously, on the other side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
But with the arbitrage / injury at the offensive line, probably downgrades at most of the coaching positions, and one more year of age on Brady, plus probably a decent amount of don't give a fuck. Because if you just skip that much camp to go golf and sit in the sun, it doesn't feel like you're the same amount of focus that was expected of you when you're hanging out with Bill and Bob and the gang up in New England. So I wonder if he finally just it's like the divorced parents, and like, oh, dad doesn't really monitor me. I can get away with whatever I want.
Yeah,
it's not strict like mom's house. And suddenly you realize, like, I'm not doing camp. I'm 40 something. Fuck this. So
ultimately, it
was a weird. It was kind of a weird, lead up into a season where we still said, like, hey, there's a lot of good players on this team yet. Sure. And I think we're kind of in the same position, jumping ahead a little. There's a lot of good players on this team still, but you don't have a Hall of Fame quarterback anymore.
Yeah.
Depending how you feel about, the next Kyle 10 Trask. Years of Baker Mayfield's career.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that might be the year. We might not even had to give the caveat off the top about this being pre-recorded, because by the time you listen to this, Kyle Trask may have stolen the QB1 job based on how poor Baker Mayfield looks so far at camp. That said, it was a weird offseason for Brady. I think by the end of the offseason, as we got into games starting, I think he was getting a divorce at that point in time. Like, it was at least public. There was a weird Reddit theory, you remember, of the person who's like, I think Tom Brady is on the Masked Singer, and that like lit things up for like an entire 3 days of the month of
for like a
August.
week.
Like, how is this thing?
He did have the
yeah.
divorce and the FTX stuff.
The FTX thing, yeah, that was in season though.
No, so I'm saying he kind of had a lot on his plate.
It was a weird year for Mr. Brady,
and yet we still saw vintage Brady a lot.
So here's where I want to pivot.
People have broken this down, but you didn't see him for big chunks of the game. But vintage Brady did poke his head out quite a few times, and often it was late in the game.
Sure.
Do you remember that Saints game? He looked like he should have retired at halftime. And then he goes out there in the fourth quarter and puts together two of the best drives they had all year.
Yeah. That rope
shit,
me.
This guy can still like kick it up 3 notches.
Sure. That rope-a-dope me into backing them to beat the Cowboys when they got absolutely annihilated in the playoffs. I was like, well, if he could do that, if he's got that in his bag, he's going up against Mike McCarthy, why not? No, they were summarily thrashed in their playoff loss, 31-14, and all the signs were there. Although I will say, this is what I maybe need a little your help or a little reflection on in the 2022 campaign, Andy. Tom Brady he dropped back something like 750 times, 733 pass attempts. Do you want to guess if that is a career high? I think it might be. 733 was a career high for him in pass attempts. By a lot. His previous was the year before at 719. His highest in New England ever was 637. Yes, I know there's a 17th game and that matters, but that's still a huge delta of increase.
Add 50 to 637, yes. You still don't get close.
Yeah, that's a lot more passes. And that was sort of the telltale of the Tom Brady offense, which is we're going to throw it, we're going to push the boundaries, we're going to find out how much throwing is too much throwing. And part of the reason was because the complementary part of their game with the rushing attack was so underwhelming that they just sort of had to. Here's the crazy thing that I kind of am having a really tough time wrapping my head around, Andy. If it was a known they were always going to throw, there was not really a ton of misdirection, and their interior offensive line stunk. Tom Brady, of course, got the ball out of his hands at an all-time fast clip, which helped things. But would you believe he was the lowest pressure rate of any quarterback that qualified last season? For whatever reason, like he got the ball out of his hand fast enough. He was never hit. He was never hurried, and he was only sacked a handful of times. Only sacked 22 times. That was way, way low in his kind of career numbers. And so like he kind of was doing it in spite of the weaknesses with the O-line. I don't know. Does that check out to you, or is there some bust here in the data that I'm misremembering, or what?
No, and I think a big connection, and I think if you read any other Bucks preview or any other kind of explanation of the Bucks 2022 season, I let off with like, hey, their rush EPA, their rush stats, just any stat you want to look at for running the ball was 30th or worse, it feels like. I mean, they all are. I mean, but you hear this so many times. They did throw so many screen passes. Yeah. And they say the cliche that goes around that, it's an extension of the run. It's a screen passes are run plays, So if you lump those together with the running, it doesn't look as bad. It still wasn't great. But they did kind of lean on that short stuff, a lot of screen plays. So, I mean, they put a premium on getting the ball out quick. And I don't know if some of it was because they just knew going in, we don't have the offensive line right now to hold out for long, deep drops, more than a couple times a game when we know it's in an advantageous position as far as how their defense lines up. But, that's, I guess it works smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Like if you have you can scream at the 5 guys up front until you're blue in the face, tell them to play better. But sometimes just throwing the ball a lot faster is a better way to not get hit.
Yeah, his pocket time was his career low, 2.2 seconds. His air yards was a career low, 6.7 intended air yards per pass attempt. That was way down from his other 2 years in Tampa. And yet, there were still flashes like the game against Carolina in the second half where they just unloaded it, and he all of a sudden looked like he had perfect chemistry with Mike Evans again. there was enough flashes where I very unwisely burned a pile of money on that Monday Night Football playoff game. But I think the real message, the real lesson of the 2022 Bucs was when Brady left New England, they had a clear 2-year window to try to chase championships with the talent that existed on that roster, the acquisitions that they made, and Brady kind of at the very tail end of his career. They pushed it to 2.5, 3, and it all kind of completely fell apart because you had regression for some of the older players on that roster, injuries all of a sudden caught up to you, and you didn't really have any of the injection or backfill of youth from your drafting and development program to kind of make up important snaps. And so that was kind of, in my opinion, sort of the telltale story of the 3-year arc of the Bucs. Surprised they won a Super Bowl maybe a year before people expected. They didn't quite get as lucky the next year as the Rams got the better of them in the playoffs. And then finally the third year was literally everyone.
Yeah, no, and go look at that 2020 season too. Just the injury luck was immaculate. Go look at when the Rams made it. Both, sometimes it takes just a team that's in the top 20%, has a quarterback, and they have just immaculate luck with the injury bug. Because we saw what can happen to some of these really good teams when it bites them the next year, how far they can fall off. So, yeah, the 2022 schedule turned out to be sort of easy-ish. A lot of the teams that were predicted to be a little better weren't as good. They played a bunch of middling teams. They ended up getting some nice wins against a few of them, but yeah, at the end of the day, it wasn't a great record, and their win total sitting at 6.5 because of that. And boy, I know we do this before you actually dig in to a division, much less a team. You kind of end up with these preconceived notions, and just kind of looking at the roster, I'd be like, man, this is like an alt-over team for me if I see anything from the quarterbacks in camp. And then camp comes, and it's like, well, that's come and gone.
Never mind.
Because it is a good roster that has a lot of nice pieces on it. All 3 levels of the defense. You have very good wide receiver room. You have some pieces. You brought in some things. You've kind of revamped the offensive line. Yeah. But man, if it's not, the Baker Mayfield we saw at his peak in Cleveland, you're going to end up with 6 or 7 wins an awful lot of times.
Yeah. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers of 2022 were the most underwhelming to anyone who backed them from a betting standpoint. Their over-under win total was 11.5 last year. They, of course, won 8 games, so they missed that by a mile. The alt-unders came in, even though they ended up winning their division as pretty meaningful favorites. Super Bowl price was plus 780 last year. They did not come close. The real impressive thing, Andy, the Buccaneers played 18 games last season. They somehow went 4-13-1 against the spread. This was a team that covered their first 2 out of the gate with impressive wins, impressive defensive performances at Dallas, at New Orleans. 2 road games out of the gate. You're a small favorite. Your defense takes care of business while the offense gets their legs under them. They would only cover 2 more games the rest of the way. They were one of the hottest fades in the entire NFL, maybe on earth. And it was because the offense could not score 20 points. They went under their total 12 out of the 18 games, only went over on 6. And the overs were games where the other team kind of took the top off of your defense. And that was games against Kansas City, Baltimore, San Francisco, Cincinnati, and then, late in the season, Carolina and Atlanta. But it was pretty typical. How do you bet this team in the regular season last year? You fade them. And then if it's a good quarterback on the other side of the ball, you play the over. And then that was kind of that. So really weird season from the Bucs. I feel like I bet all these games. I had equal amount of a game where
bet Seattle against them.
Oh yeah. I had, I think about a wash across my entire season betting these guys because I had some standout awesome reads on specific matchups and games like the week 1 under, week 2 against New Orleans. I remember backing them. But then there were some what in the hell was I thinking moments later in the season. 13-point favorites at Carolina, Andy. They lost 21-3. 2.5-point favorites against Seattle. I thought Seattle was live. They made quick work of Seattle there, ultimately only winning 21-6, but covering. I thought they were a good bet. I thought the defense was going to get at Brock Purdy and hang a first loss on Brock Purdy when they went at San Francisco. Tom Brady's homecoming, big game. Let's show up, guys. They lost 35-7. That
was ugly.
There were some moments I bet on these guys to turn it around, and they just no-showed. And ultimately, I think this will go down as one of the kind of, I don't know what the right word is, but just underwhelming seasons from a team with some elite talent that I could ever remember.
Yeah, and then the playoff game, they hosted a playoff game, obviously against a 13 win, or it would have been a 12 win Cowboys team at that point. 12 win wild card team. I think they closed 2.5-point dogs at home, which was, I can't believe now, which hindsight is a beautiful gift, but looking back at how that matched up, surprised you didn't see enough support to push it past 3. I think there was a bit of a push and pull at 3, if I remember right. But obviously didn't come close to that. They were losing, 18-0 at half, and made some inroads in the second half.
It could have been worse.
Yeah, much too little.
Probably should have been worse.
Yeah, and that was the end. And almost exact. I think it was exactly a year later. Tom Brady says, "I'm done for real this time, and I'm single, ready to mingle. I have lost $3 billion in FTX. I need to go figure my life out." He didn't say it. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but and we head into this offseason, and I guess that maybe one more reason, and this is, we can talk about the offensive line a little too, but obviously not excited about Baker Mayfield. Don't know much about Kyle Trask.
Sure.
Haven't seen him at this level, really. But they went and got the quarterbacks coach from Seattle to be your offensive coordinator. The guy who, absolutely kind of had to be some part of the reclamation project out there. Took something. So I was a little hopeful. And I that's maybe while I'm, and we're recording this on August 1st. This will be funny when we release this. And Baker Mayfield is retired because he goes he goes 0 for 21 in camp. Actually, he's getting guaranteed money, and he's kind of got to grin and bear it for the season, even if he loses his starting job. But I still have hope that they can sort something out. It's still so early in camp. If he has any magic beans at all, he can get Baker Mayfield to, because he was above average quarterback at his peak. Now, granted, that was a different team and a different time, but if you can get Baker Mayfield to be a middle of the road replacement level quarterback, you still have enough pieces here to win this goddamn division again. I don't know what the goal is. They certainly aren't selling people off, and they were backfilling. It's definitely not, when we start talking on Mondays, our first team, sometimes we're talking about a team that might be tanking a little.
Oh, yeah.
Or a team that's early in a rebuild. This is not the look of a team that's tanking. There's not really a tanking team in this division. And it's, it does feel like they absolutely feel like they can get it done here if they can get anything out of the quarterback position. I'm kind of with them too. That said, we'll have to look at those prices. For me, it would just be, hey, this is a team that can win 9 games if they have good quarterback play. But I'd like your take on some of I called it backfilling. Some of it is, not that. Obviously, Ryan Jensen has been on the team. He's on the team. He just missed basically everything but the playoff game due to tearing every acronym in his knee in the preseason, missing almost everything. And then they brought in a couple of, and they moved Wirfs too, right? Wirfs was right tackle.
Yeah,
correct?
now he's playing on the left. Yep. You're
So
right.
he's moved
Donovan
over to the
Smith
left.
was their left tackle last year, and he was a walking
They
holding
drafted the
penalty
ginger
false start.
kid from NDSU.
Yep.
I watched him
Cody
a little
Mock.
at the combine. Bring in Matt Filer. And I'd like to hear your take on where you think the offensive line is compared to last year.
Well, I owe the listeners a my bad. You brought up the fact that it was 18-0 at halftime, right? Against the Cowboys. And I said it should have been more. That was the infamous game where Brett Maher missed every extra point. It should have been 21-0 at halftime. Maher missed 4 consecutive extra points in that game. So it was 24. It was 24-0 Cowboys with 6-6-6-6. And yeah.
That's the thing about a game like that. If that game is close, it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
If it's a blowout like it was, it became more of a comedy where it's like, oh no, what's going on? But it's like, oh shit, Dallas is still up by a bunch. So like,
yeah,
we can deal with this. That was one of the weirdest things.
Yeah. Sorry about the diversion there, but to answer your question about the offensive line. The offensive line, I rate 22nd. So this is a bottom half unit. Interior offensive line, 23rd. And if you're going to try a Baker Mayfield experience, I think you better protect him. If there's maybe one thing he can do, it's throw a nice deep ball. But this offensive line and the additions you made, I don't really see this working to where he's going to be afforded the opportunity to play best Baker Mayfield. I have a minus grade on Luke Goedeke. Don't know how to pronounce that. I think he's overmatched at right tackle. Cody Mock obviously is a rookie, so impossible to project there, but that looks like a problem. Your backups for both of those positions are a problem. So the right side of your line is, I would expect very little. I think Ryan Jensen can bounce back and try it at least by the end of the season. Maybe the unit plays a little bit better, but moving Tristan Wirfs to left tackle from right tackle seems like a tricky thing to ask him to do because he was so good at right tackle. And Matt Filer, good player, but again, not enough to really help elevate that line to above average. So Baker Mayfield potentially going to be a little bit on the run and going to be pretty unsupported by a rushing attack that it was poorly schemed last year. They have moved on from Byron Leftwich. Byron Leftwich's offensive play calling and vision and philosophy, his scheme was bad last year. It was predictable. They force-fed Leonard Fournette when they absolutely did not have to. But there's really no one coming to the rescue in the running game. All of these guys are replacement level at best. It's just a who's who of guys who have not really worked out. Rashad White, Chase Edmonds, Keyshawn Vaughn, Patrick Laird. I mean, good luck getting anything going in the running game against.
You probably named like 2 players that might not even be on the roster.
Probably, yeah. And if there's a strength on this team, it's not the tight end position, it's not the running back position. It is the wide receiver position where you at least have 2 bona fide guys who can make hit all pro numbers, and that's Mike Evans, of course, and Chris Godwin. Both guys are healthy. Both guys probably raise the floor of your offense enough that you're not going to be in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes, which is a bad thing for you as a franchise. So if I were Tampa and I were seeing what was going on with my quarterback situation in camp, I would be actively shopping both guys to see if I could get meaningful trade value back, especially for Mike Evans, before you really have to make a tough decision and let him walk away with no compensation. So in my mind, no guarantee that those guys finish the season on the roster. Chris Godwin would be a guy you would want to keep because he's a little younger and maybe has a little higher ceiling after now coming back off of the injury-ridden season. But slot wide receiver is an issue for you. Not a Russell Gage guy. Depth is an issue for you. So I think 2 good wide receivers does not make an offense. And for those reasons, you probably need to consider moving on and starting over, which is kind of what you do after you put all your chips on the table for a 2-year window where you actually got a Super Bowl. So don't really feel bad for Tampa. I feel like they should tear this thing down to the studs. I just don't really know if they have a little too much talent offensively to be a team that's competing with the likes of the Cardinals, the Rams, the Commanders, the Raiders, the Colts, Texans, Titans for the number 1 pick next year. There's a lot of teams kind of in that mix.
They feel a little purgatory-ish, where it feels like a very narrow, and we'll look at the schedule after we kind of finish up the offseason here, but there's a lot of winnable games. Part of that is because they play in a division with 6 winnable games. Despite us saying this is not a very good team, like getting 6-7 wins feels very, very, not very frequent, modal and frequent. And, going way under or way over probably depends on, if you have really, really poor quarterback play, you could muck it up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's silly because we say this about every team. Like, hey, the quarterback's important, guys. But seeing what we get from a new OC and a new quarterback is probably going to determine, their range is like 5 to 9. And it's not 5 and it's not 9 very much. It's a lot of 6s and 7s. I'm all 6s and 7s today, I think.
Defensive,
they drafted. Yeah, they drafted Kancey, which is nice to add to a strength in your interior line next to Vita Vea, but he basically has the Joe Burrow injury. They're saying it's not too severe. Hopefully he's back for week 1, but that's not ideal for a guy who hasn't been in, if it's, hey, this is my 6th year at the team. I've been through camp 5 times. I know the scheme. It's the same DC. He's a rookie coming in. Like, he needs camp. And so that's bad. I guess added to safety. The secondary is center strong. Like obviously, like the Antoine Winfield's very good. Depends how you rate Jamel Dean, I guess. Very, very good linebacking core. So front 7, if Kancey works out, good. Secondary, maybe a little weaker along the edges, but this defense projects to be good, not great.
Yeah.
So it should keep you in games if you can get it together a little bit on offense, which is keeps you in games, puts you in purgatory again.
Yeah, I feel like you're correct in every regard here. The defense is going to be good enough to keep them in games. The Kancey draft choice felt like a little bit of a luxury pick, considering how many places you need to really build up at this point with your roster. I was surprised by that, at least. No one that really let walk out the door moves the needle for me a ton defensively. The only close call is Mike Edwards, who I like at safety. Everybody else was kind of a depth piece. Golston and Hicks really didn't. They both underperformed on the D line. Keanu Neal, Murphy Bunting, Logan Ryan were all underperformers. So you kind of are clearing out some of the pieces that didn't really work out for you, and you're replacing them with youth, which may work out. But the pass rush is still a question mark outside of Vita for me. Joe Tryon. Shakoya.
That was somebody they spent first round capital. That was actually
he's been a bust
presser.
Yeah,
that was a presser that I caught. I mean, I think it was full on head coach said it. Like, he needs to perform. Like, basically, like we drafted you. It was late, but we drafted you in the first round, and it's like 8 sacks in 2 years.
Yeah, Shaq Barrett.
That has to happen. And Shaq Barrett too. I was just gonna say
coming off an Achilles. Yeah.
You can. So if you're a pass rusher, if you rely on speed and explosiveness at all, sometimes modern medicine's great, and we've seen some freaks of nature like Adrian Peterson come off an ACL injury and do amazing things. But when you're relying on that, if you have had a really bad Achilles injury, you can lose a step pretty quick.
Sure.
You can lose some explosiveness, some speed, some power off that leg. So remains to see if he can return to his former glory, but hopefully that would help bigly with the pass rush, obviously.
Yeah, and I think Yeah, these are pieces that I will also like if they are performing well early in the season. Like I'm shopping. Like I'm fire sale if I'm the Bucks general manager here, and any of these guys who have been around for more than 5 years, if they're showing signs of life early in the season, like they're going to have enough value to get you picks for a rebuild. I think that's where you go. I agree with you that Antoine Winfield, solid safety. David and White, solid interior linebacking duo. So you should have really good coverage of tight ends and slot receivers and all that stuff. But
and David and White are very good.
Yeah. I like Dean fine. I like Davis fine, but neither guy's like anywhere close to say top tier cornerback in the NFL these days. So those guys can get beat by good wide receivers. Tackling is a little bit of an issue. The Todd Bowles scheme relies too heavily on the blitz. And they don't really, to me at least, have good enough coverage now to survive that. So I think the defense is beatable, but from an elite quarterback, kind of like we saw last year. Joe Burrow handled them easily. San Francisco in their scheme handled it easily. Lamar Jackson, he came back with aggressiveness in that head-to-head. Made it look easy in the second half, if I remember correctly. And then Pat Mahomes, of course, just utterly took their pants off. It was a very, very unimpressive effort by the Bucs defense against the Kansas City Chiefs. So all that said, defense is going to be good enough to keep you in games against bad quarterbacks, but the offense looks like it's got a very, very, very hard ceiling. And I don't really know what you do to fix that. I really don't know what to make of this new offensive coordinator either. So overall, I give their offseason grade an incomplete because I think it made sense not to sell all of their dollars for 30, all of their chips for 30 cents on the dollar in the offseason, but maybe they get a little bit more from them if they show up and they're playing well at times in the first half of the season. And at which point I would go like A- with their offseason. But right now it's looking like a C.
Yeah, I was going to say C+ because I think it's misguided to not reset after your championship.
Yeah.
Where they're at. If you had made a move for a good quarterback.
Yeah, what would you have done?
Then this checks out. It's like, but you're really banking on a guy who's never, been an OC and and Baker Mayfield because those are the two most important things to go right.
There's another AFC North quarterback you could have made a run at, Andy. Lamar Jackson. If you plug and play Lamar Jackson with this team, is this a team we're talking about as
your
a
running
contenders?
Game is better.
Yeah, it was much better. Like you plug and play Lamar Jackson on this team. Is this a team we're talking about as contenders for an NFC championship?
Probably. That's a huge delta. They had 5 rushing touchdowns last year, too. You know how many players had more than 5 rushing touchdowns? Like 30, I bet.
Yeah.
And you know what? I bet a bunch of them weren't even running backs. I bet there's like 5-6 quarterbacks that are in there.
I think almost certainly there are.
I bet Taysom Hill had more rushing touchdowns than this team did last year. I bet there's some some guys that are like slashes, like Cordarrelle and
Taysom Hill had 7, Andy.
7. There we go. I was going to say they gave him the ball a bunch down. Oh God. I guess he's a quarterback, but
yeah.
All right, off-season grades are not.
So
good.
Do we have to then give them a C or a D for not doing that?
I'm giving them a C.
C. Okay.
I've downgraded from the C+. Okay. All right, let's look at the schedule because I said there's some easy spots. They do have a first place schedule, which is tough. So you play some tough teams. You see the +10, +6, +7.5, +6.5. You play division winners. One of those is the crossover to the NFC North. That's a plus, though. Getting to play the NFC North, getting to play the AFC South, and getting to play your own division. Obviously, you could do a lot worse. But on top, you still have some just grinders. Like, hey, San Francisco on the front end of a back-to-back road, Buffalo on the road, Philly having to play Philly at all because that's such a bad matchup with their pass rush. And then, leading off against a team with a pretty good passing offense right off the bat. It'll test that defense. That's going to be an ugly game. I don't know what to think of that. Minnesota, Tampa.
Yeah, weird one.
That might be the high spot for Baker. Like, oh, he looks pretty good against this. As Flores hasn't, completely gotten the defense sorted out at that point yet. And Baker looks good for 1 week, and then goes to Chicago, plays another bad defense, looks good, and then, oh man, this team is, they're 1-1, but they're right there with Minnesota, and then they go to Philly, and that never quite gets to 7, and Philly wins by 30 points. I mean, that's a home game, I guess. It's a home in Tampa, but boy, that's an ugly matchup.
Yep. By the way, you play 4 of the 6 quarterbacks who scored at least 5 touchdowns on the ground last year. You want to guess? You want to name those? You want to play that guessing game? Who were the 4 quarterbacks on their schedule that scored at least 5 rushing touchdowns last year?
Fields hurts right off the bat.
Bang, bang. Yep.
I'm seeing. I had to skip over a bunch. There's a bunch of rookies in there. Did Ritter?
No, he didn't get there.
Josh Allen.
Yep, he's 3. And the last one is Trevor Lawrence had 5 rushing
I was vacillating between T-Law and Tanny.
Somehow Trevor Lawrence had more rushing touchdowns than you did as a team, or as many, I guess. Here's the thing. You went through that list of quarterbacks, and I think you picked up on something pretty interesting, which is you're playing a lot of young and inexperienced quarterbacks up and down this list. There are not a lot of veteran quarterbacks on your schedule.
That's the other nice thing.
That's nice. You're only favored in 1 game. That is kind of insane, right? Okay, so quarterbacks with more than 2 years of service on your schedule include Derek Carr twice, Kirk Cousins. I guess we have to say Hurts has more than 2 years because he had that 2 1/4. Goff, Josh Allen, and that is it. All of these other games, you're talking about rookie or second year or into their third year guys, which is favorable if your defense is performing well, particularly because you at least have a strong linebacking core. Presumably you're well coordinated. Presumably your blitz is going to be really effective against those young quarterbacks. You should this Tampa Bay defense against this schedule should pretty clearly come out above league average, right?
Yeah, like this defense's ceiling is like 10th, maybe even a little higher. It's just the problem is the offensive ceiling is probably like 20th.
Right.
And you don't win championships with defense. That said, you point out this schedule and all the inexperienced quarterbacks you play. If I were able to handpick a schedule, I mean, obviously, still within the structure of having to play certain divisions, and I know I'm playing a first place schedule, you could do a lot worse with a team structured like this, where you have a really good chance to be a top 10 defense. Your offense stinks. Like that doesn't always work out. But against a bunch of inexperienced quarterbacks or, wet behind the ears and a bunch of guys trying to figure it out, or some guys figuring out new places like Derek Carr, that's where I was at with this team. I kept coming back to that. I said, this is a team that can probably overperform based on their schedule if they get anything out of quarterback. And, it still just all falls on Canales and Baker make some magic happen in 8 coin flip games here?
Yeah, basically the games you circle on your schedule where you're like, this is how we make our season. There's like 5 on here where you are very small home dogs, right? And how you perform in those games goes from like, okay, you're a 4-13 team to you're a 7-10, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you need to win Indy, you need to win Houston, you need to 3 or 4 wins in division, and then you got to win on one of these teams like Atlanta, Tennessee, Green Bay, something along those lines.
Yeah, tough to see. Tough to see more than 7 wins on here, even if your defense is top 10, in my opinion. A lot of disadvantage.
The top 10 defense gets you your win total. It gets you to like 7.
Yeah.
But if the offense doesn't show up in a meaningful way, there's not a real clear path to winning the division, getting 8, 9, 10 wins. Because still, like, if it's a middle of the pack offense, you still get the shit kicked out of you by Philly, Buffalo, San Francisco, but you win like 80% of those coin flip games on the rest of the schedule. And
here's the problem, man.
Suddenly it's a really bad. It's another team that's hosting a wild card as a dog.
Week 11 through 15 is where things go sideways for me with these guys. And actually, really, you want to go week 8 through 15. Back-to-back roadies, Buffalo, Houston. You get Tennessee at home.
Yeah, you just got to punt that Buffalo game.
Back-to-back roadies, San Francisco, Indy. You get Carolina at home. Back-to-back roadies, Atlanta, Green Bay. So that is 6 road games in 8 weeks there. You got an early bye. There's no saving.
None of them are
rest.
Sleepover games.
None of them are sleepover games. The Indy game, which is sort of maybe the one you circle, like, well, maybe we get those guys. Well, that one, Indy's coming off of their bye, and that's a nasty travel spot. Tampa to San Francisco, turnaround, Tampa to Indy. No thanks. That's a terrible travel spot at the end of November. And I think even the sandwich home game you got in the middle there versus Carolina, like, Carolina is going to be much better at that point in the season than they will be at the beginning of the season, just based on the young quarterback getting reps. I think you're kind of screwed here. This looks like a really bad schedule to me.
The positive is rookie quarterbacks. The positive is playing bad teams that are in rebuild. The negative, devil's advocate, is obviously, well, the Houston and Indy games are 2 of your most winnable games, but they're on the road and they're back-to-backs after good teams.
Yeah, right.
In kind of bad travel spots.
Bad travel spots. And you're
all right, let's see what kind of betting odds we're going to get on this shit heap of a team.
Chris Godwin was good.
We made the joke because we had a typo on a card about having to add a 0. Essentially, that's what we did to their Super Bowl odds.
That's wild. Yeah, plus 750 was down plus 7,500.
Yeah,
it's not enough. It's not enough to get me off the couch. No, thank you. I think my fair price is over 100 to 1 for them to win the Super Bowl. And I don't even know if I don't know what price you would have to get me to actually put money down on these guys to win the Super Bowl, but that's fine. NFC 50 to 1, same story, not a big enough number, even close. NFC South plus 750. If their schedule wasn't as, it didn't have quite as many disadvantages. I mean, maybe we're talking ourselves into something here, but because that's a big number for a bad-ish division, or at least a perceived bad division. And again, like, inexperience with Atlanta and Carolina at the quarterback position. You got a defense that blitzes the shit out of the ball. Maybe NFC South is achievable, but I just think the ceiling for this team is more like 7 wins. Make playoffs, no, minus 500 looks fair. Win total is 6.5, juice to the under. So people have already had their turn, believing that the tank will be on when we get to the end of the season, which I guess is maybe the other thing we didn't even really weave into looking at the schedule. Not exactly sure who ultimately is on this roster as you get to the end of the season and you're going with some of those kind of key coin flip games. It gets you to 5, 6, 7 wins instead of 4. So I think if I had to make a play on this team, I'm probably playing alt under 4.5 wins just in case they decide to rip it all out. But I don't even know if the price is going to be worth that at this point, because under 6.5 is already juiced to minus 142.
Yeah, you're going to get like plus 225 or something. It's not going to be great enough. And there's still, there's still so many bad quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, bad teams in that second half of the schedule. It feels like I said, awful lot of 6 and 7 wins. So then we kind of went over range of outcomes. I said kind of 5 to 8 with not for, maybe I'll lean more towards just not many 8s. 6 and 7 a lot. Win total is probably set just about perfectly. be interesting. I guess if Baker doesn't work out, I guess Andy GM get Trask in there immediately.
Yeah,
at least see
absolutely.
what you got.
Absolutely.
You spend draft capital on him, see what you got with, with this skill position players you have, and see what's going on. Maybe he's the day one starter. Who knows? It doesn't feel that way. I know the camp reports or something, but you don't go out and get, someone a former first overall who's not that deep into his career. This isn't like, and we'll talk about this in a next episode, but this isn't the Andy Dalton sit and hold their hand from the bench, teach them about being in the league kind of signing when Baker Mayfield. They didn't have to pay him very much. It's a very reasonable quarterback, contract, but still, it does feel like they signed him to play. They probably feel like that gives them the best chance. And,
I don't know, man. I'm very, very, very strongly considering starting Trask week 1 if I'm them.
I think it's the right move because you want to know what you got there. But for my prognostication is the fact that this team didn't sell off and still is, at least a little bit going for it. That doesn't feel like, hey, we should start a rookie quarterback and see what we have then. It doesn't jive with the philosophy that they're the vibe they're putting out. I agree with you. I'd want to know what I have with him because I think I know what I have with Baker. But I think if I can be talked into, hey, this guy fixed Geno, he can fix anybody. It does feel like they at least start the season, although we literally saw what happens starting a season with Baker Mayfield last year in division. You were part of that. You were very close up. You were sitting on the glass and got to watch that whole thing unfold. So be interesting to see. We'll know more obviously in a few weeks once we've had some preseason games. By the time you listen to this, maybe we'll know a lot more. And then, betting plan was, if this could be an under team.
I think against a good pass rush, I'm not even hesitating. The thing is that I'm going through their cumulative, kind of net differential here. They don't play a ton of really nasty pass rushes. So that's kind of why I think you just go with roll Trask, man. You get Minnesota and Chicago 1-2. Like, get him a little bit of confidence. Then you got to go against Philly. That's tough. New Orleans, bye. Like, I think I kind of want to see that. I mean, I don't have any strong feeling that Trask is any good, but you picked him second round, end of the second round in 2021. So this is it for him. Like, you need to see him this year, or you need to move on. That was pretty decent draft capital. So, kind of an interesting question about what you do there. Trask, I didn't realize Trask was that same year of quarterbacks as Trevor Lawrence and Mac Jones and Fields and Zach Wilson.
Yeah.
And Trey Lance.
That's all I have to say about Tampa Bay, baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have any other notes. Just see how this defense plays, see what happens at quarterback, and not going to really have to worry about this team too deep into the season anyway. We'll figure it out. I guess it depends how the rest of the division plays. So with that, let's close this one up, and we'll take a quick break. We'll take a quick commercial break here before we talk some Panthers.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Carolina Panthers Day, Andy. Really an interesting handicap.
It's a fun one to look into, I think, for sure.
Yes. Excited to talk about this team. Excited to get your temperature on this team. A team that is at the beginning, is at the early stages of a rebuild, at least by their own admission, threw assets into the fire to get the number one quarterback pick in this draft, staked their flag in a little guy from Alabama with big heart and Bryce Young. And It's an interesting time. Coach turnover. Almost the entire coaching roster turned over, but you brought in a bunch of really interesting and somewhat hot names in the assistant coaching ranks here. Pretty clearly, you have a team that is still super talented defensively, and it is kind of in win now mode on the defensive side of the ball, paired with an offense that is really who in the world is providing skill, the skill position players who are going to make a difference for this group. And it all kind of revolves around Bryce Young kind of showing that he is ready to go right out of the box as your starting quarterback, because that's what we expect as we sit here and look at the Carolina Panthers, that this is Bryce Young's job to prove going forward in 2023. How do you feel the betting market and just the people whose opinions you care about? Like, what do you think that what's the general take on this Panthers team right now?
I think the vibe is that it's a good rebuild. I think you definitely improved in a multitude of ways the coaching. After I go through this, I want to hear your opinion on the trade for number one.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot that they gave up, maybe even too much, but you can't understate the nothing works if you don't have the quarterback. And you might not end up in this position where you have that top 10 pick that, is going to be a big crux of that trade package. They made it happen. I respect them for going for it. Say, we're going to go get the quarterback we want. We're not trading into fourth. We're not moving up a little. We're going to go get the guy we want, the guy we think is the best of these three quarterbacks, and we're going to put him on our roster for the next 5 years and see where we're going. So I respected the move. I liked the hires. I didn't like some of the free agency signings. I think some, and I will put an asterisk on that. If they're treating some of it as like, hey, these are placeholders because we can't go into the season with the wide receivers we have. Like, we got to at least add somebodies because I love Adam Thielen. I really like him as a person, as a story. So he was kind of a local kid from around here that just kind of made it happen for himself. He went to one of those scouting camps and just suddenly was on a roster and turned into a really good player. But he is definitely on the decline. So I liked a lot of what happened. And I keep having to remind myself, like, this isn't the year. They know that. Everyone, with half a brain knows, like, it's awful hard to make it. You can't accelerate a rebuild too much, otherwise it just turns into shit. So you can't fix everything all at once. So bringing in Thielen and Shark, some guys that were pretty good like 3 years ago, that's fine. Those are nice placeholders. You got to replace them at some point, and some sneaky good pieces on the defense. So I like where this team's at. I think their win total is, I'm kind of right there with Tampa. It's like, man, that's a pretty good number. Like, that's kind of where I have this team an awful lot of times. And again, we have a huge unanswered question because traditionally I've been horseshit at deciding which rookie quarterbacks are going to be any good. Although I never wavered on Trevor. I saw something, I figured that he'd at least be good. Maybe not great, but man, that the urban thing, having the whiff of that on him. But man, I liked Josh Rosen. I liked Darnold. I wasn't like a Josh Allen guy, which, to be fair, nobody was a Josh Allen guy to start with, unless you're from upstate New York or you're a big cat. So I've given up on like predicting if a quarterback will be good or not. Like, get it. He's small. He played with all these wide receivers that went in the first round of the draft. He played behind a bunch of offensive linemen that went in the first few rounds. He's always had running backs that go, fairly early. Fuck, even tight ends. Like, it's just this whole team. Obviously, it's Alabama. I don't have to tell you this. So I'm flummoxed to try to make some prediction on whether he'll be good or not. But man, the short thing, it doesn't always jive. good coaching and good
Mhm.
people around you, you can make it happen. We've seen multiple Hall of Famers over the last 20 years that are pretty short. So I'm not going to use it as a huge knock. So kind of in a nutshell there, I like the vibe. I like the rebuild, and I realize like you got to be patient with this because
Do you think
that roster is not there.
You think he ultimately gets an NFL body in terms of weight?
Yeah, he's definitely going to have to bulk up.
You think that's possible?
I mean, that's the thing. It's not 1980 where they would have just had him like, hey, crack a couple eggs and drink them raw this morning. Like, the level of technology we've gotten to with like nutritionists and dietary experts and trainers and people that can help you put on weight, in a responsible and efficient manner. It feels like it's very possible in 2023.
Okay.
Like,
well, let's circle back on this and let's talk a little bit about
needs to happen though. Too
oh yeah, big time.
Too little guy.
He's just a little guy. Yeah. Nervous about watching him play football to a degree. Let's talk about 2022 though, because the Panthers had what was actually on paper a successful season last year. Their win total was 6.5. They made that by a half win. They were right there in the mix for a playoff spot, as we covered in the Tampa Bay pod. If they had won against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on January 1st, 2023, I think they're probably hosting a playoff game. Instead, they lose after. I think they blew a lead in that one. They were
winning that game. They coughed that game up. But so what I said about Brady, he showed up sometimes.
Yeah,
in the fourth quarter of games, they did win their last game, but it didn't matter.
They were up 21-10 in the fourth quarter of that game against Brady before losing, and it was a really weird season for the Panthers because they change ownership. The new owner comes in. He wants to put his fingerprints on the team, and he wants to get rid of Matt Rule. Matt Rule was their preseason favorite last year for first coach fired, and he was the first coach relieved of his duties. And they handed the keys to Steve Wilks, who went 6-6. Wow. Steve Wilks, who knew? Steve Wilks, maybe even more impressively, did it with Ben McAdoo as his offensive coordinator, Al Holcomb and Phil Snow as his defensive coordinators, and a mix of PJ Walker and Sam Darnold at the quarterback position. Darnold ended up starting 6 games at quarterback. PJ Walker started 5. There was a little bit of Jacob Eason time in there. Baker Mayfield was relieved of his duties as well after 6 games and a 1-5 record to start the season. I don't really know what to make of that. I don't think that ultimately if they had started the season with Sam Darnold as QB, if this was a more successful campaign and there were a above 500 team that wins their division, because it definitely didn't feel like, I mean, Mayfield didn't do anything to win games early on in the season, but don't really remember being like, well, he's the reason why. Like, that's what's going on here. Like, I think just in general, the team didn't love playing for Matt Rule, and they underachieved by a decent amount. And, they didn't play anybody good. They lost to the Browns, lost to the Giants, beat the Saints, lost to the Cardinals, Niners, Rams, on their way to 1-5. And, but I guess there was enough flashes that the team didn't quit. That's cool. They had some good veteran leadership, and I feel like largely they got it turned around on the defensive side of things. Even though they gave up 37 points to Atlanta, 42 to Cincinnati, so they had some pretty clear ups and downs. Very weird season overall, and I think you have a pretty good idea of the players who exist on this roster and what their values are, and just in general how to come up with a fair price outside of the quarterback position. So not a ton of questions for me, really.
The defense, to your point, the defense has good players at all 3 levels, but all 3 levels are also incomplete. Like, you're lacking one more edge rusher. You're lacking probably one extra piece in the defensive secondary as well. And again, they play a little different up front. It's 3-4, so it's hard to shit on the edge rushers and not shit on the linebackers a little too. But like, the interior linebackers were good. Just I need a little more from probably the interior pass rush and the edge rushers, I guess, from a front seven standpoint. And it's funny, like Brian Burns, very, very good. You know, they saw some good things from, I mean, Thompson and Luvu. Have some good players, just not quite there. And that's kind of what I've been saying about this team the whole time. We're missing, we're missing just a little bit everywhere. And I mean, especially the offense. It wasn't that long ago. You had DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey, and this is the first time I'm going to get to say this on a podcast. Chosen Anderson.
Yeah.
So
I find
it's like there's not a huge deficiency anywhere. Obviously, unless quarterback's just lost, it's not like they're just going to be absolute garbage anywhere. But there's no like, this is our huge strength right now.
This is our identity. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is a pretty clear, their identity is defense. I rate this defense fairly highly. Every single starter.
It has a higher likelihood of being like good compared to this offense for sure.
Yeah. If you think of defense as a weak link system, I don't even actually see the weak link here. Every single starter on defense is above replacement level player. The big acquisitions.
Where do you have YGM? Gross tomatoes.
As an outside linebacker, I have him above replacement level. Yeah, I have a decent score on him. No one is screaming off the page, I'm a star.
I kind of want to guess who your lowest rated player is of the 11 then.
My highest is Brian
Von Bell plugged in.
Yeah. Von Bell.
Derek Brown?
Yeah. Derek Brown I have as good in ascending. Yeah. Again, because like he's kind of right at that age where this should be his breakout year.
Hopefully.
My lowest rated player is Shy Tuttle. Nose tackle. And I have him above replacement level. So Frankie Luvu maybe is a little bit, another guy who may be a weak link, but it's the defense overall.
He's ascending too. A lot of people like him a bit.
Yeah. Brian Burns, excellent. Derek Brown, good in ascending. Jeremy Chin, excellent. And then potentially ascending. Dante Jackson coming off of an injury. The flashes we've seen from him, he is a good player. JC Horn, similarly, good player, but availability is a question mark. So maybe it's the cornerback position just because they're not especially deep and those guys are a little bit injury prone. But I love Bell. I like Woods. I love Chin. This is an overall of just a very, very good defense on paper. Just good sound defense. And we haven't even gotten to the fact that they're upgrading from a scheme that was, a little underwhelming. Didn't really even utilize the best of the talent here. A couple of defensive coordinators because somebody must have gotten fired when Matt Rule got fired. But they're upgrading to Ejiro Evero, who is one of sort of the hottest names in defensive coordinating circles and is doing impressive things with this same level of talent last year in Denver. So if you look up through most of the season and the Carolina Panthers are at the top of most statistical categories defensively, I do not think it should come as a surprise.
Yeah, Phil Snow was shit canned at the same time as Matt Rule there.
Yeah, he was not doing an especially good job, but I could have told you. Much more excited about what Ejiro Evero is bringing to the table. So I think realistically, the defense is going to keep you in many, in almost every single game. I do not think you're going to get blown out. You're going to get run off the field, even against the very good offenses that you face, which aren't even that many. For me, the weakness on the team and the question mark kind of revolve around the wide receiver room. And that's where we go answering the question about the Bryce Young trade. Did you have to give DJ Moore up? Was there any other way?
I know that's
to
the
get
part
that done.
That's the part. And I really think they did. The Bears really wanted him. They made it sound like they really wanted him to be a part of the deal. I don't know, how the negotiations went, if they tried to throw in more draft capital. But you can't give away all the draft capital either if you want to. Yeah. If you want to continue to be on this rebuilding path. So, yeah, that sucks.
The overall usage for DJ Moore last year was insane. I think his target share, 118 targets, just that share relative to the rest of the offense was pretty unbelievable. 63 catches on 118 targets. The next highest was Christian McCaffrey, who only played 6 games for you. After that, it was Terrence Marshall Jr. with 47 targets. So I don't have the percentages right in front of me here, but I feel like he was basically almost 50% of your offense. And now he's in Chicago. And you replaced him with presumably Terrence Marshall Jr. takes a step forward. DJ Chark, if he's got anything. Adam Thielen, if he's got anything. Jonathan Mingo as a rookie. Laviska Shenault as a weird gadget player. Shai Smith is a huge, as a potential breakout. I mean, these are all very, very, very suspect cast of characters to have like huge breakout seasons for you and eat up, absorb 50% of your, your usage of skill position players. Tight ends.
The vacated targets.
Vacated targets, yeah. The vacated targets are pretty serious. Hayden Hurst has never been a guy I've been super excited about as a tight end. Miles Sanders is a guy that you probably overpaid a little bit at the running back position. If you weren't going to keep Christian McCaffrey, I'm not sure why you got Miles Sanders.
Like, if he's not, they're expecting it, but if he's not a true 3-down back for them, that deal sucked.
Yeah. So overall, your offense has a low ceiling because the skill position group is pretty clearly bottom 10, maybe bottom 5 in the NFL. Pair that with a rookie quarterback who they have potential to be turnover magnets. And I can see this being a situation where Carolina is in a lot of games and winning games where Bryce Young happens to hold on to the ball as opposed to committing 2 or 3 turnovers. I think it might be that volatile of the season for the Panthers in general. Offensive line, it's worth noting, is pretty good. This group is not great, but they're good. Actually, I have them squarely average. Interior offensive line is a little weak. I don't rate your center and your right guard especially highly, but your tackles are fine. Depth is a huge problem. If any of your offensive linemen go down, then we're in trouble.
Yeah, you need Icky to continue to ascend, and the offensive line doesn't probably have a high ceiling. Hayden Hurst still in the league.
Not expecting
it's not fun to look at this offensive roster right now, especially if you're a Carolina fan or a fan of Bryce Young and you want to see him succeed. It's a tough road to hoe with the skill position that he has kind of put with him on this roster right now. But
yeah, like if you're up against an elite secondary, you're screwed. Like I really don't even know what you call. Just lean into a run-heavy approach that week and hope you win 10-7, 9-7, 9-6. like you're gonna have to have some game plans when you're going up against elite secondaries that you're literally like, we're keeping this game in the teens. That's our only shot because we are not going to be moving the ball on these guys. Maybe I'm crazy and Terrence Marshall Jr. has a huge breakout and DJ Chark has more in the tank, or Jonathan Mingo is, the next coming of Justin Jefferson. Who the hell knows? But I see a lot of receivers that are going to struggle to create separation on this entire offensive roster against anyone better than average.
Yeah, if you're Adam Thielen and you had a down year with, I'm assuming, and this can't be 100% accurate because sometimes just things get mixed and, you're trying to scheme this to not happen. But I'm assuming the CB1 probably covered Justin Jefferson more often.
It's a fair guess.
So I mean, you got guess. You likely didn't face a CB1 ever hardly last year. Got a lot of 2 and 3 on you. So I'm not super hopeful for anybody in the wide receiver room. And again, you have a complete unknown at quarterback. So I think it's kind of where we're at with Tampa. We have a pretty known, this defense is going to fall somewhere between 10 and 15 for me.
Yeah,
I think that's good. Like it's a team on the rise on that side of the ball. The offense is probably 20 to 25, and that's maybe high side.
So the interesting kind of combo here then between 2022 and the offseason grade is you didn't have to give up DJ if you had lost more. But I'm glad you fought and won and got a bunch of your defensive players. Like,
yeah, what percentage chance
playing well
would you say to get the one pick if they'd kept Rule and Baker? Like it's like 30. They were rough. I mean, and at that point they still would have been selling. Like you still probably make the McCaffrey trade. You make the.
Yeah, I'm glad they held on to a couple pieces. There was people floating around Brian Burns stuff. Like, I'm glad they kept the team together.
Like
I'm glad they played hard.
I was hoping he wouldn't get traded, and they end up keeping him, which is nice.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, like, it's a good enough nucleus, and just in general, like, it's not relying on stars. It's just good players everywhere with a good coordinator that I think. You're going to be, you're going to be impressed by these guys in a lot of weeks. The entire question is, can anyone emerge offensively to help Bryce Young develop? And I don't see a good answer for that. But this is a lot. This isn't have like Justin Fields Chicago whiffs in terms of how bad that group was last year. And, but it's close. It's pretty close. And the offensive line is a little more competent, but again, one injury, and all of a sudden now you're talking like you've thrown Bryce Young exactly into that situation where he's running for his life. He's got no one that could create separation, and the run game maybe is a little too predictable. And then, he's taken a lot of shots in his rookie year. I think that's probably where this is headed. Dan reminds us they had the PJ Walker Hail Mary mixed extra point versus Atlanta loss in OT. That was a tough one. Oof, that was a wild one. They were very, very, very close last year in so many ways to winning the division.
I'm giving them an A for off-season grade.
Okay.
Just in case, and Dan, write down this timestamp. Just in case Bryce Young turns out to be really, really good. Like, fuck, man. All right, so this is the part we'll clip. Yeah, I'm giving Carolina an A. I think they've hit a home run with Bryce Young, and he's going to be one of the premier quarterbacks in this league within a year or two.
I'm going to give them a B because I think they did give up too much in the Bryce Young trade. So let's see. Chicago got DJ Moore. First and second round selections in 2023. That was the 9th and 61st pick. 2024 first rounder, 2025 second rounder. Okay. So Panthers do not have their first round pick next year. That's a bummer because boy, oh boy, would it be fun to go swing away on like an elite round one wide receiver to put on this unit. So they're going to have to solve the skill position group through free agency, or second round hope and prayer, which is it's worked out for some teams, but I feel like this is going to be a longer project to get Bryce Young up and running than plug and play and win and compete this year, even though otherwise you have a lot of really good players on this team. And the hope is, I think, that your defense isn't on the decline when Bryce Young finally has the pieces to emerge in year 2-3, probably year 3.
Yeah, and we don't do this a lot. We try to stick with the team we're talking about, but kind of a quick question. Who do you think has, and this is very relevant for a certain award, who do you think has the best chance of having a good year one between the three quarterbacks based on because they're all kind of in a position where, hey, you don't have a ton around you, especially if the one loses his running back, who's also a pretty good receiver, because there's some infighting going on now.
So we're not including Clayton Tune.
We'll keep him out for this, just for this one.
And we're not including Will Levis because Titans seem to want to try to win this year. So it's probably going to be Tanny wire to wire. Okay. Of the three, QB wins probably most likely goes to the Panthers because their defense is so good.
Yeah.
But I think his statistical profile is going to look pretty unimpressive. If he can avoid turnovers, then maybe it actually looks fair. It looks good. And maybe they win an extra game or two. Maybe they get to 10 wins. It's not crazy in my mind.
I feel like Richardson could have a.
But
Justin
Richardson
here,
Richardson would have been.
He's an athlete.
Right. Richardson would have been, because CJ Stroud's in the same situation. Good O-line, fine scheme, terrible skill position group. I think Richardson he's going to be perceived to have had the best season, is my guess, even though he may not have as many wins, because his home stretch is really favorable for him to pop a little bit. And he's got a little bit more that he's working with, assuming Jonathan Taylor shows up at some point.
It feels like it's one of those where, hey, they didn't win very many games, but there's upside there.
Yeah. And I think
we're having the Justin Fields conversations, like,
especially pairing him with Steichen. That's kind of exciting. So I think Richardson probably.
Yeah.
But again, it's also possible all three don't do enough to really, they don't do enough to warrant significant consideration to challenge Bijan Robinson, who's, I don't know if you've seen, he's got some sick moves, Andy. He's got some moves.
The schedule, speaking of playing Bijan Robinson twice this year, right off the bat, Atlanta at the Mercedes-Benz Thunderdome, or whatever it is called. There's
Megatron's butthole. Yeah.
Megatron's butthole. Jeez. It does look like an anus from the sky. Not super aesthetically pleasing from the drone shots, but starting off with Atlanta and New Orleans, couple important divisional games right off the bat. Bit of a nasty stretch there heading into the early bye with, it is a good defense, so probably a better matchup than some teams having to face Minnesota, because your strength is defense and secondary, and you should be able to bottle them up a little on offense. It's at home, and you have a weak offense, but their defense should, I've mentioned this already once, like, maybe still be figuring out. Maybe they never figured out. That's still my thesis with Flores. Like, hey, he's going to be a good coordinator next year, when they had some pieces that are actually good players to that defense. So just winnable games, like, 3-3, definitely in the cards. But if you lose one or two of those coin flips, it's very, very possible you go into that bye not feeling great about yourself. And then you come out against the two rookie quarterbacks, the other two we just talked about. These are fun games.
Dude, this is such an easy schedule.
And then, I was going to say, you got Jacksonville and Dallas, but it's just a shitload of coin flips.
Dude, you're favored in 5 times as many games as the Bucs.
Literally 500% more.
And you have 1, 2, 3 games where you're +1. You have a game where you're +1.5, a game where you're +2.5. So, and a game where you're +2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games where you are realistically very much in it, just from win probability standpoint. You're going to be in every game this season, except for the Miami game, the Dallas game, and maybe the Jaguars game. Those are your 3 hardest games? Dude, the Carolina Panthers could go to the playoffs with this schedule. And a top 5 defense? I think they could. This is really, really easy.
It's the same thing, and we're going to say this over and over when we do these 4 divisional teams, but it's the same thing. Like, hey, Ritter.
Let's go through. Let's list them all down. List them all. Ritter, Carr, Geno, Cousins, Goff, maybe Tua,
maybe Skyler. Who knows?
CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Fields, Dak, Tanny, Trask,
Cal Trask. I can never remember.
Carr again, Ritter again, Love, Lawrence, and Trask. Kyle Trask, probably. So, you know how many top 5 quarterbacks we just named? 0. You know how many top 10 quarterbacks we just named? 2.
Yeah, I was going to say, who's the best quarterback they'll face?
Trevor Lawrence.
Dak, Goff,
Surely it's
and
Trevor
Trevor.
Lawrence. Then Tua, then Dak.
I mean, Dak
is borderline top 10 for me. So
Dak,
we'll say
Goff, Kirk, and Dak.
Goff, yeah,
pretty close.
Kirk, but yeah, I mean,
might be Trevor Lawrence. Jesus,
Trevor Lawrence is the toughest quarterback you face, and you have a good defense. How many good
Division 1?
Yeah, how many good secondaries do they go against? Atlanta has a good secondary. Saints, okay. I got to look at this a little bit more carefully. I might be making Panthers bets. I just didn't put together how easy this schedule is.
Oh, it's the same schedule, except they don't have to play the first place teams. That's
exactly.
That's Tampa's fatal flaw is, the fact that they won the division. That's the only thing that made the schedule remotely hard. And this is where I want you to pump the brakes a little.
Injury. It's all.
Well,
not injury. It's all turnover.
New Orleans. Go look at New Orleans' schedule.
Yeah, same shit. Yeah,
not terribly dissimilar.
Yeah,
Atlanta's schedule, not terribly dissimilar. Everyone does have a pretty easy schedule in this division. Tampa's is just tougher because they have to play some first place teams. But it's you're right. That's why you're giving a team with that much offense to talk about and a rookie quarterback that's completely unproven, a win total at 7.5. The schedule is definitely playing into that because they should probably be a 6.5 team, but it's a very forgiving schedule to be sure. And yeah, if you wanted to play Carolina, if you really believe in Bryce, you probably should be playing some Carolina over 9.5, 10.5 wins. Because if he's good, they're going to win more of these coin flips than they lose, and suddenly it's a division winning team.
Okay,
we're gonna make a case for every team in this division to win.
Well, I think that's kind of the nature here. Okay, so Andy,
true.
I am projecting the Panthers concede the 3rd fewest points this season after San Francisco and Dallas. And that is all schedule based. This defense is going to clearly be top 5 on paper by the end of the year, in my opinion, because of how easy this is and the personnel strength they have on that side of the ball. Turnovers could vault them into the top 2. Defensively, offensively, turnovers could take them out of some of these games, surely, and they could lose some that they would otherwise ought to be winning. But man, the prices might be right to back these guys to get something going this year. So I guess.
And the one thing that we did kind of miss on because we focused so much on, the drafting a quarterback first overall. They did take a wide receiver.
Yeah.
In the 3rd round.
Mingo.
That might be your 3rd wide receiver. None of these other guys are, imposing enough for me to say that he won't weasel his way into that depth chart. He was. No, good.
I'm sure he will.
He had a very good season.
If he doesn't. You ought to do that just for his growth and try to have get some chemistry in the future for those guys.
I believe I have to look this up. Yeah, he was fast.
Okay. So
4.46 at the combine.
Here's the question, Andy, about getting involved. Then is the beginning of the season where they have games against Atlanta, New Orleans, Seattle, Minnesota, Detroit, Miami. Those are, this is it's clearly an imbalanced schedule where it's much easier down the stretch than it is at the top, even though you're not facing any good quarterbacks. The nature of Frank Reich teams starting slowly, does that give you a pause in betting any Panthers until they get some of the rookie jitters out from Bryce Young, get some of the Frank Reich slow start out of the way? Like they start 0-4, and then we get Panthers wild card frisky or something? Because like the rest of the schedule is
those
so
slow
easy,
starts
man.
were always like, oh shit, we gave him another bad quarterback. Frank Reich was supposed to come in and have Andrew Luck for 10 years, man. Poor son.
He started slow with Andrew Luck. He started slow with Philip Rivers. Like ultimately made the playoffs with those guys.
Philip Rivers. I forgot about that season, man. They've really been through the paces at quarterback the last 5 years. But
I think rookie quarterback.
It's true. That's a thing. I don't know if there's signal there. I'd have to go look at those schedules.
They got rest disadvantage in the first 6. They got travel disparity in the first 6. They got Frank Reich's shadow.
Are you just saying we should be betting on them a little later?
Yeah, I'm saying
more of betting plan.
Coming out of the bye, that's when you get involved. And you hope that they finish the final 11 weeks of the season 8-3, which is doable. 9-2 is doable for what I mean. For all we're talking, this team can win 8 or 9 games in the final 11 just because the schedule is that forgiving. Let's look at the odds. Don't think I'm playing Super Bowl, even if it drifts past 100.
You know what I would add though. If I'm truly a believer in, hey, Mingo is legit, he's probably your wide receiver 2, maybe 1 right off the bat, and Bryce Young is going to come in and make it happen with this coaching staff, I'd probably take I bet you could find a 40 on NFC if you poked around.
Okay. But at the same time, if they're 2-4 at the bye, that's going to be like 100.
Yeah, good point. Like, yeah,
right?
Maybe everything should be added at the bye, and then
any kind of future, I think you got to wait here. I'll be surprised if they come out of the gate in this offense.
Because even if they're 3-3, it's not like, oh man, this team's like 20-1 to win the conference now.
Right. Because the other thing is, Bryce Young, rookie quarterback in the playoffs, is going to get his absolute lunch fed to him in his first playoff start. Right? Like what is like talk me into taking 9.5 points with the Panthers in San Francisco in wild card round.
I mean, in this scenario, they're hosting a game against a wild card team.
Okay.
So it's
talk me into taking the 2.5 points with the Panthers hosting the
Minnesota.
Eagles. Yeah. No, 3.5 points.
Eagles are a division winner. No, I mean
Cowboys. Then Cowboys go down.
You probably get you get like the Cowboys. Maybe you get the Vikings.
Cowboys come to town. Cowboys Lions. Are 2.5 point favorites, just like they were in Tampa last year. You talking me into taking 2.5 with Bryce Young in that spot?
I don't know. He's been in big games, man. We're scared. We saw Burrow do it. If we get to the bye and NFC's like 100-1, I'll probably take a little. That's a fun ticket to have if they win the division.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna think about it. I think the
it's not like, oh good, they get 2 road games most likely.
Yeah.
And you never know. You win your division, and with the difference between the division winner in the NFC North and the wild card team and the division winner in the West and the wild card team and like Philly and Dallas, like there's nothing saying you have to win 2 road games to make the Super Bowl.
Okay.
Like having being the 3 or 4 seed in the NFC feels like there's an awful lot of times where if it isn't Philly, you might be hosting the NFC title game. Okay. So it feels like from 2 to 6, it's kind of compacted. Okay. You end up with like the 3 and the 5 seed in the NFC title game. Wouldn't that be something? Fucking Charlotte hosting I'm really getting ahead of myself.
Andy,
Let's go to the range of outcomes. The range of outcomes apparently is win the fucking Super Bowl.
2 years ago, the 4th seed Rams hosted the 6th seed Niners.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think I have that wrong.
Party naked.
Yeah. The plus 360 to win the South is not bettable right now, but again, I'm going to look at that number hard in middle October. The make the playoffs yes price, I think, is the way to really attack. If it gets out to 3-1, oh boy,
that'll be the conversation we have. We got to say like, we'll do that if this turns out to happen, and we make a lot of plans, the best laid plans of mice and men here in August. But if it comes to it and we're sitting in that bye week, we will do a little discussion on this. We'll take like a hypothetical $100, and we'll just because we work in a base 10 system here in America.
100 units. Okay.
100. We'll take $100 and we'll say how you'd split it up between the various ways, because you can go Super Bowl, conference,
Sure,
make playoffs, division, adjusted win total. And I think there is, like you said, make playoffs should be like 50% of that.
Yeah,
then,
that makes sense.
And then 5% on win the conference, maybe 15 on win the division, a little bit on like an adjusted. Yeah, 0 on the Super Bowl. A little bit on if there's an adjusted win total.
Yeah, maybe.
Of like, of like 6.5 with a plus number in front of it on the over.
Oh my God, that would be nice.
That would be a fun one too. So
okay,
if they're too
good. This is good. This is good.
We'll do some of those. Those will be fun.
Yeah, and also like it. Yeah, I don't have a good answer right now because if the Desmond Ridder experience is going pear shaped, if the Saints defense has significantly regressed because of personnel losses, and if the Bucs are playing for a draft choice, then it might make sense to put it all 100 units on to win the division at like 3 or 5, 4, 5, 6 to 1. Yeah, 100 unit banger.
We'll play.
So yeah, that's right. All right, range of outcomes for me is playoff appearance for sure. Is in the range of outcomes for me. I think schedule, strength of defense is enough for me to tell you that this team could surprise to the good and be a playoff, be in the playoff mix, even if they start shitty. If they start good, then and we miss all the prices, they might just be a bet any given week type of team. If people are doubting the defense is good because they just don't recognize the names, that would be a nice way to kind of continue to preserve a little bit of value on the Panthers. Hopefully their losses are, just because they can't quite get the offense going, or there's a couple fluky turnovers or something like that early on, and it preserves a little bit of this value for us. We'll see. But the bet on week in, week out Panthers feels like the right call here, big time. And I mean, there's not really a low floor for these guys, I don't think. Right? Wouldn't you be like kind of quite surprised if this is a 4th place finisher in the division and they win like 4 games?
I mean, Mingo couldn't work. Nobody else on the line took a step forward, and you would need really, really bad quarterback play. Like, hey, he looks lost out there. Hey, he's not making any reads. His pre-snap, read is garbage. Once he gets into the play, he's not seeing things. He's turning the ball over a lot. Like, you'd need to, really be fucking up because, and I think a situation where that is like, hey, this having 9 running backs and every other position player is also a running back in Atlanta, that has to work. Derek Carr has to work out. Like, to finish 4th, you need the other divisional teams to be on the high end of their expectations.
Okay.
Because it's not just like, there isn't just like, oh, it's Kansas City, they're going to be good. They're Buffalo, they're going to be good. There's not like a good team in the division right now.
Okay. So it
can happen, but
yeah.
it's still like
Trevor Lawrence only
team.
won like 3 games.
Yeah, I'm going to put this coaching situation in a better spot.
Probably, right? You think Frank Reich knows what he's doing?
I'm all right with it.
Okay. Do you think they made the right choice of Bryce Young?
I like Stroud better.
Do you think
Frank I've already been over this, so I don't listen to
Brown and all of them, they were enamored with Stroud when they made the trade.
Yeah.
What do you think changed their mind?
I don't know. Like, Bryce Young is very good. They were all so good. But man, I watched a lot. I was out with the wife. I don't remember where we were, but I watched a lot of that Georgia game. And yeah,
you're talking about the college football semifinal where PJ Stroud's best
Georgia,
game of his life. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, well, shit, if he can do this, like, this guy is winning at the next level. Like, he was making shit happen. And to be fair, I don't watch a lot of college football. I'll catch it here and there. You know, I see the highlights and I understand who the good players are, but like, I hadn't watched that much of an Ohio State game. So maybe that's why I have rose-colored glasses for him, because the game I watched the most of was the one where he looked like a god on the field.
But it was against the most NFL, the most NFL-like situation he played in.
In a really tough spot with like, hey, you're playing a defense where like 8 of these guys are going to be playing in the same league as you next year.
Yeah. Man, as a rookie, Trevor Lawrence was 29th in EPA per play and won 3 games.
Yeah, I remember that was a huge disappointment.
Yeah, and it was ultimately we wrapped that around Urban Meyer's neck and pushed him off the bridge. But yeah, I mean, maybe
are you making a case that we should have kept him?
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm just trying to think through sort of the downside of, because again, we're talking range of outcomes. I had kind of dismissed because of how good this defense is, because of how easy the schedule is. I really have a tough time seeing this being like a 4-win team, but it happens all the time with rookie quarterbacks, all the time. So,
was that which year was that? Where they? Was that
21?
2019?
You're talking about the Jags?
Yeah, the Trevor Lawrence.
2021.
Why am I off by 2 years? COVID ruined my time.
Yeah, 2019 was 500 years ago.
2021. I was just gonna check if they had Chark that year. Like, yeah, but he was dealing with having DJ Chark as a receiver.
His receivers that year were Laviska Shenault.
Like Tavon Austin.
He had Laviska Shenault, Andy.
Marvin Jones Jr.
Laviska Shenault, I think, was the most targeted, right?
Quan Treadwell was on that team.
How about that? Oh, yeah, Marvin Jones had 120 targets. Laviska Shenault had 100. Quan Treadwell. DJ Chark was on that team, Andy.
I think he was later in the year.
Laviska Shenault and DJ Chark
IR.
were both. He played 4 games. Yeah, he played 4 games. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same cast of characters he's dealing with, the cast-offs of that Urban Meyer mess.
And look at what was left of the running backs after they all got injured. Hyde got injured.
Yeah.
James Robinson got injured. Obviously, the good one, ETN, was injured.
Yeah.
At the end of the year, you had like Raquel Armstead was here. Like High Sergeant.
Dare Ogunbowale started 2 games for you. Do not know who that is.
No.
Is he even a running back or is he a fullback? He's a running back. Wisconsin kid.
It could be one of those like tight end. Oh yeah, no, that's why it sounds kind of familiar. All right. So the betting plan was check back with us in October, whatever.
Yeah.
Probably has a ST at the end of it.
Yeah, I think, I think bet unders. Like week 1 against the Falcons. You really telling me that Ritter
just bet a Falcons game and feel good about it.
You're telling me that Ritter and Bryce Young and then with this mess of skill position players.
And I do believe, in some of this steamer on the 43. Falcons defense getting better as well. So.
Yeah. I don't think that total's getting to 43 personally. That is my second favorite under week 1 after the Cardinals Commanders one. I feel like both games 17 points might get you a win.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So I'm excited. I'm just excited about this. One of these plans coming to fruition and us having, we're sitting there in week 16 and the Panthers they just ripped off like nine wins in the previous 10 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if that math works out.
They're head-to-head week 16 on Christmas Eve with Green Bay and Bryce Young fighting for playoff seeding 3 and 4.
And I'm sitting on 115 to 1 to win the NFC.
That'd be fun.
Honestly, if I do that, I'm going to see if I can get a book that has, maybe cash out equity.
Yeah.
I never think cashing out is never a great idea, especially when there's better ways to get out of it. But something like that, if you're going to bet say you put $100 on it, maybe you bet $50 twice, cash one of those out, take a bunch of equity.
Oh yeah, that's a good call. All right, man. Well, good show. Panthers generally bullish about this team this year. There's no sellers who would send them a wide receiver for a later round pick next year, is there? I feel like the ones I had circled are all in your division. I don't know if there's somebody who's going to sell you a wide receiver for cheap. Let's think about that. Because if they made that move, then that blows up our plan entirely, and they are a must bet now type of deal. But all right, good deal, good show. Let's wrap it up here. Join us, of course, on Wednesday when you get the remaining teams of the NFC South, your Atlanta Falcons and the favorite New Orleans Saints.
Yeah.
But very bullish about one of the teams we're talking about on Wednesday.